Dust extractor running, making sure the dust extractor is in the open position so the dust sucks up there, otherwise you get covered in it. Power in the on position, that's normally left on. With this machine, it's a matter of pushing the button in to rotate, to keep the blade rotating. Pull it out for the cut, off with the button, let it go back. When it comes to safety, these drawings are here to remind you to tuck your thumb in. This is the no thumb area. Tuck your thumb in, otherwise you might get it cut off. There's the line of cut. Obviously that's where the blade's going to go, and if your thumb's over that line, you're in trouble. Or fingers. This guard here is going to protect you, or at least remind you not to put your fingers in the way, but you need to be diligent because you're the operator and it's your fingers. There's a large scrap of wood. Don't get into the habit of pushing it away with your finger. Use the piece of wood that you've cut to move it on. Almost all of the time, the piece of wood that I want to keep is on the left-hand side. My left hand's holding it. The scrap, the off-cut, is on the right-hand side. The right hand's running the machine. That's not a very safe arrangement. Whether you're left-handed or right-handed, it's not the thing to do. With large pieces of timber, not that this is overly large, it's about 120 mil. With large pieces of timber, because of the rotation of the blade, see the arrow? Because of the rotation of the blade, it's pulling the blade into the wood. So you'll start slow. That being the case, you need to be prepared to slow the blade down as you cut. The best way to stop the speed of the blade running over the wood and keeping it at a uniform travel speed is to start and stop. Make sure when you're using the machine that this edge is clear of rubbish. If by chance there's some junk in the way and you go to cut your piece of wood, you're not going to get a square cut. Good to use a bit of timber to get rid of that. Make sure the fence is clear. Secondly, make sure the timber is hard up against the fence. If you try and cut like that, or if you have a finger here and the blade comes out to touch the wood, it's going to smack it back to the fence and injure your fingers and damage. Also be aware that the blade, now it's up to full speed. When I let go, 101, 102, 103, 106, it's still going. 110. Let's see what happens to the piece of wood. That had already wound down to about 50% less of its rotating speed. And look at the damage it did to the wood in a split second. That would do worse to your hand. How to get an accurate cut? Put your mark on the edge of the wood. Normally I don't do one that big, but this is for the demonstration purpose. I want a large mark there. Often I'll do a little squiggle to remind me which side of the line I'm cutting to, left or the right hand side. Start the blade up. Bring it out until it's just touching the wood. Slowly slide the wood up until you're exactly on the edge of the mark. And that's how you get it perfect every time. And what you should have, and hopefully you can see this in the video, is the mark left behind without the saw cut. Now, if I was to put the mark there and slide it up, you can see that I've gone too far past the line. I've started there, I've slid the blade up to the line, I've gone too far past the line, and I'm about 1.5 millimeters too short. If you're going to do anything, cut it too long, not too short. You're going to always sand it down. Once more, blade on, bring the wood, blade out to the wood. And cut. When you're finished with the machine, set it back to the 0 position, drop it down. Set it back to the 0 position, pick up your scraps of wood in the scrap box for later use, leave the machine in a safe orientation. Just as with the bandsaw, we don't want you to leave the machine in a dangerous situation because an inexperienced operator might come along, not realise that it's set too high or there's some timber in the way or whatever the case is, and not do the right thing and hurt themselves. And you could be partially responsible for that. So you need to make sure you leave the machine in a safe orientation. And last thing, if nobody else is using any of the machines, go and turn off the dust extractor. It uses a lot of electricity, and we don't want to waste electricity for no particular purpose. The same rule applies as the radial arm saw. The wood must be firm up against the fence. No thumb over the line of cut. Clamp it into position with your fingers or an actual clamp if need be. If you have rubbish behind there, you're not going to get a straight cut, even if it's only a little bit, or a square cut. If you have it out from the fence a little bit, it's going to grab and kick back and hurt your fingers. Next to the radial arm saw, we have the sliding compound saw, also known as a drop saw. Called the drop saw because the blade drops down into the wood. Sliding saw because it can slide out on that bar, drop into the wood, cut back. Compound saw because it can cut an angle, so you can cut a wide piece of timber at an angle, That's why it's called a sliding compound saw, more commonly known as a drop saw. This drop saw is pretty good quality, and down there somewhere is a lever where we can spin the blade back around to 0 degrees. You notice that lever engages into these marks on the table, which gives you a fairly precise increment. When I slide it to the next point, that's where it drops in place, that's 0. So that's 0 degrees there. Engine on. First of all, guard, up, engine on, cut, lift up. There's also a laser attached to the blade. It's turned on by centrifugal force, rotation. You'll notice there's no laser line there at the moment. When I turn it on, the line turns up and it cuts exactly on the edge of the line. So to do a neat cut, pencil mark, bring it up underneath the line, underneath the blade, line it up on the laser, and that's pretty darn good. Very useful to have that laser there. You might notice that in that cut, the back edge split out or chipped out. That's because there's no material supporting the wood. If I were to get a larger piece of wood in front of it, or any other piece of wood in front of it, that stops most, if not all of the chipping, tiny little chip there, that stops most, if not all of the chipping on the back edge. If, for example, we want to cut a 45-degree joint, pull the lever up, spin it around until 45 appears, which is just there, let go, give it a wiggle, make sure it's in place. It is now in place. If I want to cut an angle on the end of this piece of timber, you notice that the back edge chips out. The way to prevent that from happening is put a sacrificial piece of timber behind it. Needs to be whisked longer, there we go. Put my mark where it's going to go. Line it up on the laser. And that is probably, maybe I could have got another ½ millimetre off there, but that's so close that I think that I could hand finish that or just put it straight on the project, glue and clamp it into place. So a nice neat miter, two of them together will bring us up to a perfect 45-degree angle if the saw's set properly. You can see there's no gap there. I hold that together and clamp it, it's going to be fine.